A biker got kidnapped by a gang. But what they found in that abandoned warehouse shocked everyone. They thought they were taking revenge on an old enemy. But instead, they uncovered a secret buried for decades. Because the man they captured wasn't just a stranger. He was family. As violence erupts, hearts are tested. And in a place built on pain and betrayal, something miraculous begins to rise. How far would you go to protect the one who once called you a monster? And when the truth finally comes out, will it destroy them both or save them forever? The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the weathered parking lot of the Prairie Rose Diner. The small building, with its faded red trim and neon open sign, sat quietly just off Route 412 in Oklahoma. A refuge for weary travelers and local regulars alike. A rumbling Harley-Davidson pulled into the lot, its chrome fixtures catching the golden light. The rider, a man in his 60s with silver hair and deep lines etched into his weathered face, dismounted with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent decades in the saddle. His leather vest bore no patches or club insignias, just the honest wear of miles on the road. Inside, the diner smelled of coffee and apple pie. The familiar scent of grilled onions and burger patties hung in the air, mixing with the gentle hum of conversation from the scattered customers. The biker settled onto a worn vinyl stool at the counter, removing his riding gloves with deliberate care. "Coffee?" A young waitress approached, coffee pot in hand. Her name tag read Tara, and though she smiled, there was a nervousness in her movements, like a deer ready to bolt. The biker nodded, his blue eyes kind beneath heavy brows. "Black, please." As Tara poured his coffee, the biker noticed her hands trembling slightly. His gaze drifted to the far end of the counter, where a muscular man in a dirty work shirt sat watching Tara's every move. The man's eyes had an ugly gleam to them, and his fingers drummed an impatient rhythm on the countertop. "Anything else?" Tara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, thank you." The biker wrapped his calloused hands around the warm mug, but kept his attention on the scene unfolding at the counter's end. The man at the far end raised his empty coffee cup, shaking it deliberately. "Hey, sweetheart, some service down here." Tara's shoulders tensed, but she moved to help him. The biker observed how she kept as much distance as possible while refilling the cup. The man wasn't having it. "What's your hurry?" His hand shot out, grabbing Tara's wrist. "New girl like you should learn to be friendlier." Tara froze, coffee pot wobbling in her free hand. "Please let go," she whispered. The biker set his cup down and stood slowly, his movement drawing the attention of nearby customers. He didn't speak loudly, but his voice carried clearly across the sudden quiet. "The lady asked you to let go." The man's head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing. "Mind your own business, old-timer." "She is my business." The biker took a measured step closer. "We're all God's business, friend, and He's watching how you treat His children." Something in the biker's calm demeanor, perhaps the absolute certainty in his voice, or the steady way he held himself, made the man hesitate. His grip on Tara's wrist loosened. "Let's not make this something it doesn't need to be," the biker continued, now standing just a few feet away. "You've had your coffee. Time to head home and think about what kind of man you want to be tomorrow." For a tense moment, the air crackled with potential violence. Then the man released Tara's wrist, shoving back from the counter. He threw some crumpled bills down and stood, trying to save face. "Place is going downhill anyway," he muttered, shouldering past the biker. The door's bell jingled as he left, and collective breath seemed to release throughout the diner. Tara rubbed her wrist, relief evident on her face. "You okay?" the biker asked quietly. She nodded, managing a genuine smile this time. "Thank you. Let me get you some pie. On the house." "No need." He started to protest, but she was already hurrying to the pie case. She returned with a generous slice of apple pie, steam still rising from its golden crust. "I insist. I'm new here and, well, some customers think that means they can—" She trailed off, shaking her head. The biker picked up his fork. "You're stronger than you know." He took a bite of pie, appreciating its simple sweetness. "Just remember, you don't have to face the wolves alone." Tara leaned against the counter, studying him. "You're not like most people who come through here." "Had my share of hard roads," he replied. "Learned what matters." They shared a comfortable silence as he finished his pie and coffee. Other customers glanced their way occasionally, offering approving nods. When the biker stood to leave, he left a generous tip beneath his coffee cup. "God bless," he said simply, touching 2 fingers to his brow in a gentle salute. The sun was setting as he walked to his motorcycle, painting the sky in deep purples and oranges. He secured his gloves, started the engine, and pulled out onto the highway, the powerful machine rumbling beneath him. In his mirrors, a black SUV pulled out from behind the diner. If the biker noticed it keeping pace several car lengths back, he gave no sign. Inside the vehicle, the man from the diner pressed his phone to his ear, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "Yeah, that's him. Told you he'd show up again." The Harley thundered down the darkening highway, its rider steady in the saddle, while behind him, the SUV's headlights clicked on in the gathering dusk. The night settled deep over Oklahoma, wrapping the countryside in a heavy blanket of darkness. Stars pierced the velvet sky, their light competing with the thin crescent moon. Just off Highway 412, behind an abandoned gas station with faded Phillips 66 signs, the old biker had made his camp for the night. He'd chosen the spot carefully, screened from the road by a stand of scrub oak trees, but with clear sight lines in all directions. His Harley stood sentinel beside him, its chrome still warm from the day's ride. A small campfire pushed back the darkness, casting dancing shadows across his weathered face. The biker settled onto his bedroll, his movements deliberate and practiced. From his saddlebag, he withdrew a leather-bound notebook, its edges soft and worn from years of handling. The cover bore water stains and creases, telling its own story of miles traveled and memories preserved. As he opened it, firelight illuminated the pages within. Crayon drawings filled the first few sheets, stick figures with bright smiles, wobbly houses under yellow suns, the artistic efforts of a small child. The biker's calloused fingers traced the lines gently, as if touching something precious and fragile. Deeper in the notebook, letters appeared. Written in a child's careful hand, they spoke of school days and playground adventures, of hopes and small disappointments. Each one began the same way. "Dear Dad." The biker's eyes softened as he read, the stern lines of his face melting into something more vulnerable. The fire popped, sending sparks skyward. The biker looked up, alert for a moment, then relaxed back against his bedroll. The notebook lay open on his chest as his eyes grew heavy. The day's warmth, the fire's gentle heat, and the weight of memories gradually pulled him toward sleep. The attack came without warning. Dark figures burst from the shadows, moving with practiced coordination. The biker rolled instantly, reaching for the knife at his belt, but a boot caught him in the ribs. He managed to grab one attacker's ankle, yanking hard enough to send the man sprawling. But there were too many. "Stay down, old man!" A voice snarled through a black ski mask. The biker fought back with the efficiency of someone who had seen his share of violence. His elbow found a jaw, his knee connected with a stomach. But then came the distinctive click and crackle of a taser. Electric pain exploded through his body, forcing his muscles to seize. He hit the ground hard, leaves and dirt pressing against his cheek. Rough hands grabbed his wrists, pulling them behind his back. The sharp bite of zip ties cut into his skin as they secured him. "Got him!" one of the masked men called out. "Somebody kill that fire!" Through blurred vision, the biker watched boots kick dirt over his carefully built campfire. The notebook lay in the dirt nearby, its pages open to the wind. One of the men picked it up, stuffing it roughly into a pocket. "So, this is the famous traitor," another voice said, thick with contempt. "Don't look so tough now, does he?" A boot pressed into his back. "Remember me, old-timer? From the diner? Not so holy now, are you?" The biker remained silent, his breathing steady despite the pain. His lack of response seemed to anger them more. "Get him up," someone ordered. "Van's waiting." They hauled him to his feet, two men gripping his arms. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye where he'd caught an elbow in the fight. His ribs screamed protest with each breath, but he kept his face impassive, revealing nothing. A black van idled in the shadows behind the old gas station. Its rear doors stood open like a hungry mouth. They shoved him inside, his shoulder hitting the metal floor hard. The doors slammed shut, plunging him into darkness, broken only by the dim red glow of brake lights filtering through tinted windows. "Finally caught you," one of the men said as the van lurched into motion. "Been waiting years for this payback." The biker shifted slightly, testing his bonds. The zip ties held firm. He could feel the van turning onto the highway, heading east by the angle of the moon through the windows. No one spoke during the drive, but tension filled the space like smoke. Time stretched, marked only by the rhythm of tires on asphalt and the occasional flash of passing headlights. The biker remained still, conserving his strength, watching through half-closed eyes as the masked men checked their phones and weapons. After what felt like hours, the van slowed. Through the windows, the biker could see they'd entered an industrial district. Abandoned buildings loomed like sleeping giants, their windows dark and empty, graffiti-covered concrete walls, layer upon layer of spray-painted claims to territory. The van turned down a rutted access road, its suspension groaning. Ahead, a massive warehouse rose against the night sky, its metal sides streaked with rust and decay. Gang tags marked its walls, and chain-link fence hung in twisted segments around its perimeter. The van stopped, engine idle rumbling, headlights illuminating loading dock doors that hadn't seen legitimate use in decades. Two of the men jumped out, their boots crunching on broken asphalt and scattered glass. The doors swung open, and rough hands grabbed the biker's arms once more. They dragged him toward the warehouse entrance, his boots scraping concrete. One of the men produced a key for the heavy padlock on the doors. Metal shrieked against metal as the doors rolled aside, revealing darkness thick enough to swallow them whole. The biker's face remained stoic as they pulled him inside. Behind them, the doors slammed shut with a hollow boom that echoed through the empty space, sealing them all in darkness. The warehouse air hung thick with dust and decades of neglect. Two portable work lights cast harsh shadows across the concrete floor, their generators humming in the vast space. Broken wooden crates littered the ground, and rusted metal shelves lined the walls like skeletal sentinels. The smell of mildew and old motor oil permeated everything. The biker sat zip-tied to a metal chair in the center of the light's harsh glare. Blood had dried on his temple, and his silver hair was matted with sweat. 5 gang members circled him like wolves, their faces hidden behind ski masks except for one, the man from the diner who now seemed to be in charge. "You really thought we'd forget?" The unmasked man leaned close, his breath hot with anger. "That warehouse fire killed Mickey. Our leader, remember him? Burned alive because of you." The biker's face remained impassive, his blue eyes steady. A muscle twitched in his jaw, but he said nothing. "Search his stuff," the leader barked. "Find something we can use." 2 gang members dumped the contents of the biker's saddlebags onto a wooden crate. Keys clattered against metal, a basic toolkit, some clothes, a road map of Oklahoma, worn at the creases. One of them held up a smartphone with a cracked screen. "Nothing here, boss. Just regular road gear. Keep looking." The leader grabbed a handful of the biker's jacket. "Where's the proof? The money? Mickey always said you were working with the feds." Still, the biker remained silent. His weathered face showed no fear, only a deep sadness that seemed to irritate his captors even more. One of the masked men found a small leather pouch tucked into the lining of the saddlebag. The leather was soft with age, its surface scratched and worn. He pulled the drawstring open and emptied the contents onto the crate. A small Bible fell out first, its cover held together with duct tape. Several pieces of paper followed. Children's drawings done in crayon. their colors faded but still bright against the dark wood. Last came a photograph, dog-eared and creased from being handled countless times. The gang member, with a visible scar above his right eye, picked up the photo. In the harsh work lights, the image showed a young boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing next to a nun in front of what looked like an orphanage. The boy was smiling shyly, his dark hair falling across his forehead, a small scar visible above his right eye. The gang member's hands began to shake. He stared at the photo, then at the Bible, then back at the photo. His breathing became rapid and shallow behind his mask. "What's wrong?" the leader demanded. "What is it?" But the scarred man couldn't speak. His eyes, visible through the holes in his mask, were wide with shock. He pulled off his ski mask with trembling fingers, revealing a face that was older but unmistakably the same as the boy in the photo. The biker, who had remained stoic through the beating and interrogation, suddenly leaned forward in his chair. His eyes locked onto the young man's face, studying every feature: the scar, the shape of his nose, the set of his jaw. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by a wave of emotion so powerful it seemed to age him and make him younger all at once. "Eli?" The word came out as barely more than a whisper, rough with disbelief and hope. The warehouse fell silent. The portable generators seemed to fade away. The other gang members looked between the biker and their companion, confusion evident in their postures. Eli stared at the biker, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. His hands clenched into fists, then relaxed, then clenched again. The photo trembled in his grip. "This is bull," one of the other gang members said, breaking the tension. "It's some kind of trick, has to be." But Eli wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the Bible. He picked it up with unsteady hands and opened it to the first page. There, in careful handwriting, was an inscription. "To my son Eli, may you always find your way home. Love, Dad." The date was from 20 years ago. Eli backed away from the crate, shaking his head. The Bible and photo fell from his hands. Without a word, he turned and ran toward the darkness beyond the work lights. His footsteps echoed off the warehouse walls, growing fainter until a distant door slammed. The biker slumped in his chair, all the strength seeming to leave him at once. His lips moved, forming words so quiet they were almost prayer. "He's alive." Morning light filtered through the warehouse's grimy windows, casting weak beams through the dusty air. The biker's muscles ached from being tied to the metal chair all night. His throat felt raw from thirst, but physical discomfort seemed distant compared to the storm of emotions in his mind. Footsteps echoed through the empty space. The biker lifted his head to see Eli approaching slowly. His face a mask of uncertainty. The young man's boots scuffed against the concrete floor as he dragged an old wooden crate over and sat down facing the biker. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept either. For a long moment, neither spoke. The distance between them felt both vast and microscopic. 30 years of separation condensed into a few feet of warehouse air. "The others are sleeping," Eli finally said, his voice rough. "Got them drunk last night, so they'd leave you alone." He pulled out the crumpled photo from his jacket pocket, studying it. "This was at St. Mary's Home for Children. I remember that day. Sister Margaret had just given me a new shirt." The biker's eyes softened. "You were 7, he said quietly. "It was visiting day. I had the nun take that picture and send it to me in prison." "Prison?" Eli's jaw tightened. "Yeah, that's what they told me. That my father was a criminal who abandoned me after my mother died." He leaned forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "Is that true? Did you just leave me?" Pain crossed the biker's weathered face. "No, son. I never abandoned you. Your mother, Sarah, she died when you were 5. Cancer. It happened so fast." His voice cracked slightly. "I was working 2 jobs, trying to keep us afloat. There was no one else to help. I thought I could handle it alone. But you didn't," Eli said bitterly. "I ended up in the system." The biker shook his head slowly. "I was working as a mechanic back then. Started hearing rumors about this warehouse. Children disappearing, being moved through here at night. I gathered evidence, took pictures. Planned to go to the police, his hands clenched in their restraints. But before I could, someone torched my garage. All the evidence burned. Then they planted evidence, making it look like I was involved in gang activity. Eli's expression wavered between doubt and desperate hope. Why didn't you fight it? I did. But who was going to believe an ex-biker with a record? The old man's voice grew quiet. They gave me 15 years. By the time I got out, you had vanished from the system. Every lead I followed went cold. I thought... His voice broke. I thought you were dead. Silence fell between them. Somewhere in the warehouse, water dripped steadily from a rusted pipe. The foster homes were bad, Eli said finally, staring at the floor. I ran away when I was 14, lived on the streets until Mickey, the gang leader, found me. He said I had potential, said I could be something. A bitter laugh escaped him. Guess I ended up exactly what everyone expected. Just another criminal. No! The biker's voice was firm. You're my son. And everything I did, burning this warehouse, taking the fall, was to stop what was happening here. Children were being trafficked through this building, Eli. I couldn't let it continue, even if it meant losing everything. Eli stood abruptly, pacing in agitation. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you? I tried, but the trafficking ring had connections. Police, judges, they buried the truth. The biker leaned forward intensely. That's why I keep coming back here, gathering evidence, trying to find proof of what happened. The truth needs to come out, son. Eli stopped pacing, his face a battlefield of emotions. All these years I thought... He ran a hand through his hair. The gang became my family. Mickey taught me everything, how to survive, how to be strong. But you're saying he was wrong about you? About everything? Mickey didn't know the whole story, the biker said quietly. He was used, just like I was. The real criminals are still out there, son, still hurting people. Eli turned away, his shoulders tense. The biker could see his son wrestling with everything he'd just learned. 30 years of assumptions and anger crumbling under the weight of truth. I need to think, Eli said roughly. I can't just... A deep voice suddenly boomed through the warehouse, cutting him off. You brought me all the way out here for this old ghost? Both men turned to see a massive figure silhouetted in the warehouse entrance. The gang boss stepped into the light, his face twisted with fury. A jagged scar ran from his jaw to his temple, and his eyes burned with dangerous intensity. You think this is over? He snarled, advancing into the warehouse. Eli stiffened, his face draining of color. The brief connection between father and son shattered like glass as reality came crashing back in. Shadows lengthened across the warehouse floor as day faded into dusk. The work lights buzzed overhead, their harsh glare creating deep pockets of darkness between the rusty shelves and abandoned machinery. The air grew thick with tension as heavy boots echoed through the space. Riggs' massive frame dominated the warehouse floor as he circled the bound biker. His neck and arms were covered in prison tattoos, telling a story of violence in crude ink. A jagged scar ran from his jaw to his temple, pulling his mouth into a permanent sneer. The other gang members hung back, watching their boss with a mixture of fear and respect. So, Riggs' voice rumbled like distant thunder. 30 years later, the ghost comes back to haunt us. He stopped in front of the biker, studying him with cold eyes. Mickey said you'd return eventually. Old dogs always circle back to where they buried their bones. The biker met his gaze steadily, saying nothing. His silence seemed to irritate Rigg, who suddenly kicked the metal chair, making it scrape across the concrete. You got nothing to say? Rigg demanded. No excuses for what you did to Mickey? Mickey made his own choices, the biker said quietly. Riggs' face darkened. He turned to the gathered gang members, particularly fixing his gaze on Eli. You want to know what really happened? This rat here, he jabbed a finger at the biker, is the reason Mickey died in prison. After the warehouse fire, cops swooped in. Mickey took the fall, protected everyone, but somebody talked. His voice dropped dangerously. Somebody gave them just enough to keep Mickey locked up until cancer ate him alive. Eli stepped forward, his face tight with confusion. He says it wasn't like that. The warehouse, it was being used for… Shut your mouth! Riggs' roar echoed off the walls, making everyone flinch. What, you believe this old man's fairy tales after a 5-minute chat? Mickey raised you. He kept you off the streets when nobody else would. The biker's chains rattled as he straightened in his chair. Mickey wasn't who you thought he was, Rig. Don't you say his name? Rig snarled. He was part of the trafficking ring, the biker continued, his voice carrying clearly through the warehouse. Children disappeared through here, dozens of them. I tried reporting it, but the police were bought. The judges were bought. His eyes met Riggs. So I burned it down. And when they arrested me, I kept my mouth shut about everyone involved. I chose prison over becoming a witness because I knew what would happen to my son if I talked. Riggs' laugh was ugly. Nice story, old man. Real touching. But Mickey told me all about you before he died. How you tried making trouble, spreading lies. Then when things got hot, you cut a deal and ran. He pulled a gun from his waistband, checking it methodically. Been waiting a long time to set this right. No! Eli's voice cracked like a whip. He moved between Rig and his father, hands raised. This isn't right. Something's not adding up. Get out of the way, boy. Rig's voice was deadly quiet. Just listen. Eli's eyes were wild, desperate. If he really informed, why did he do time? Why didn't he get witness protection? It doesn't make sense. Makes perfect sense, Rig said. He played both sides. Tried being clever. He studied Eli's face, his expression hardening. Unless you're choosing his side now? After everything Mickey did for you? The warehouse grew deathly silent. The other gang members shifted uneasily, watching the confrontation unfold. Eli stood frozen, caught between his past and the truth threatening to unravel everything he'd believed. Rig reached into his jacket and pulled out another pistol. He held it out to Eli, grip first. Time to prove where your loyalty lies. Don't do this, the biker said softly. Shut up, Rig barked. He pressed the gun into Eli's hand. Mickey took you in when you were nothing but gutter trash. Fed you. Taught you. Made you strong. His voice dropped to a whisper. Now show me. You deserve that trust. Eli's hand trembled as he gripped the pistol. The metal felt cold and heavy against his palm. He turned slowly to face his father, the gun hanging at his side. The biker looked up at his son, his weathered face calm despite the fear in his eyes. There was something else there too. A deep, unwavering love that transcended the years of separation. It's okay, son, he said quietly. Enough talk, Rig shouted. Do it now, or you're next. Eli raised the gun, his arm shaking violently. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he aimed at his father's chest. The warehouse lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across both their faces. The biker never broke eye contact. His voice was steady, filled with quiet certainty. If it's between me and you, let it be me. The gun wavered in Eli's grip as father and son stared at each other. 30 years of loss and pain suspended in the space between them. The warehouse air grew thick with tension as everyone waited to see what choice would be made. The gun trembled in Eli's hand, cold metal slick with his sweat. His father's eyes never left his, steady, accepting, filled with a love that made Eli's chest ache. The warehouse lights hummed overhead, the only sound breaking the thick silence. Behind him, Rig's breath came in expectant huffs. The other gang members shifted their weight, boots scraping concrete. Everyone waited. Eli's arm felt like lead. His finger rested on the trigger, but something deep inside him screamed against it. He saw his father's face through a blur of unshed tears. The weathered lines, the quiet strength, the complete absence of judgment. This man had burned down a warehouse to save children, had gone to prison rather than risk his son's life, had spent decades carrying photos and drawings, never giving up hope. The gun lowered inch by inch. "I can't," Eli whispered. "I won't." The words had barely left his mouth when Riggs' fist crashed into the side of his head. Eli stumbled, the gun clattering to the floor. Stars exploded behind his eyes as another blow caught his jaw. "Weak!" Rigg roared, grabbing Eli by the throat. "Soft, just like I always suspected." He slammed Eli against a metal shelf, sending rusty bolts scattering. "Mickey wasted his time on you. Get away from him!" The biker's voice thundered through the warehouse. Despite his restraints, he lurched forward with such force that the chair toppled. He hit the ground hard but kept struggling, chains rattling against concrete. Riggs' boot caught the biker in the ribs, once, twice, 3 times. Each impact drew a grunt of pain, but the old man didn't stop trying to reach his son. "Dad!" Eli tried to push past the gang members holding him back, but someone's fist drove into his stomach, doubling him over. Rigg grabbed a length of pipe from the floor and raised it high. The biker's eyes widened a fraction. Before metal met flesh with a sickening thud, blood sprayed across the concrete. The old man went limp. "Stop!" Eli screamed. "You'll kill him!" "Maybe that's the point." Riggs' voice was ice cold. He tossed the bloody pipe aside and straightened his jacket. "But death's too quick for traitors. Let them think about their choices for a while." He turned to 2 of his younger members. "Watch them. If either one tries anything stupid, shoot them both." He grabbed Eli's chin, forcing eye contact. "I'm heading back to the city. Got some loose ends to clean up thanks to your daddy issues." His grip tightened painfully. "When I get back, we'll see if you've remembered where your real family is." Riggs' boots echoed through the warehouse as he stormed out. The metal door slammed with finality, leaving behind a heavy silence broken only by ragged breathing and the steady drip of blood. The 2 guards roughly dragged Eli to the far corner of the warehouse, binding his hands and feet with zip ties. They tossed him onto the dirty floor like a sack of garbage. Across the room, they propped the biker's chair upright again. The old man's head lolled forward, blood matting his gray hair. Hours crawled by. The work lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that stretched and shortened as night fell. The guards played cards on an overturned crate, occasionally glancing at their prisoners. One dozed while the other paced. "Eli!" The whisper was so faint that at first Eli thought he'd imagined it. He raised his head from the concrete. "Eli." His father's voice was wet and raspy, each word seeming to cost him. "It's not too late. You can still walk away from all of this." Eli wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Both of them bound and beaten, probably going to die, and his father was still trying to save him. But the sound caught in his throat, becoming something closer to a sob. "How?" he whispered back. "After everything I've done? Everything I've been? The past." A racking cough interrupted his father's words. When he continued, Eli could hear the blood in his voice. "The past is just that. Past. What matters is who you choose to be now." Eli rolled onto his side, ignoring the protest of bruised ribs. His jacket pocket crinkled. With bound hands, he managed to work out the old photograph they'd found in his father's belongings. The prison visiting room was bright in the faded image. A small boy, himself at maybe 6 years old, sat on a metal chair, beaming at the camera. Behind him stood Sister Margaret, the nun who'd brought him to visit his father that day, one of the last times he'd seen him before everything fell apart. The boy in the photo looked so happy, so innocent. No idea that within months he'd be lost in the system, bounced between foster homes, eventually ending up on the streets where Mickey found him. Mickey, who'd seemed so kind at first, who'd given him food and shelter and what felt like family. Mickey, who'd slowly shaped him into something harder, colder, who'd taught him that violence was strength and mercy was weakness. Tears welled in Eli's eyes for the first time in years. They traced hot paths down his cheeks as he stared at the smiling child he'd been. The child his father had never stopped carrying with him, even through decades of separation and loss. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though whether to his father or his younger self, he wasn't sure. The photograph blurred as more tears fell, dropping onto the concrete floor of the warehouse that had brought their broken family back together in the worst possible way. In the darkness, his father's labored breathing was the only reply. Morning light filtered through the warehouse's grimy windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. The night's chill still clung to the air, making every breath visible in pale wisps. Eli shifted uncomfortably against his restraints, his muscles stiff from hours on the hard floor. His father remained slumped in the chair across the room, dried blood dark against his gray hair. The metal door creaked open, and Javi stepped inside carrying 2 paper bags and water bottles. At 18, he was the youngest of Riggs' crew, with a boyish face that didn't quite match his tough guy stance. His eyes darted between Eli and the biker, lingering on the purple bruises blooming across Eli's face. "Breakfast," Javi announced, loud enough for the other guards to hear. He approached Eli first, crouching down to untie one of his hands. "Boss says you still gotta eat." Eli took the bag without meeting his eyes. The smell of gas station burritos and coffee wafted out. A sad excuse for a meal, but his empty stomach didn't care. Javi moved to the biker next, his movements slower, more hesitant. The old man stirred as Javi loosened his restraints enough to let him eat. Blood had crusted around a nasty gash on his forehead, and his breathing was shallow and raspy. "You need help?" Javi asked quietly, glancing back to make sure the other guards weren't paying attention. The biker's eyes opened, startlingly clear despite his injuries. He studied Javi's face for a long moment. "You remind me of someone," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Who's that?" Javi busied himself with opening the water bottle, but his hands trembled slightly. "Myself, about 40 years ago." The biker accepted a small sip of water. Young, scared, wanting to believe there was something better, but not seeing a way out. Javi's shoulders tensed. He made a show of checking the biker's restraints, leaning in close. "I'm not scared," he muttered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "No shame in fear, son." The biker's words were gentle. "Fear keeps us honest, makes us question the path we're on. This is the only path I've got," Javi said, but uncertainty flickered across his face. "I used to think that too." The biker shifted in his chair, chains rattling softly. "Back when I ran with a crew in California, thought that life was all I deserved. Then someone showed me different. What happened? Prison chaplain. Could have written me off as just another lost cause. Instead, he saw past all my anger, showed me I could choose another way." The biker's eyes held Javi's. "Someone did that for me. Now I'm doing it for you." Javi's hand paused on the chains. "Rig will be back tonight," he whispered. "Bringing more guys. Heavy hitters from the city." His fingers slipped something small and metal into the biker's bound hands. A pocket knife. "I shouldn't be doing this." "But you are," the biker said softly, "because you know what's right." Javi stood quickly, backing away. "Eat your food," he said loudly for the guard's benefit. "I'll be back for the trash later." Hours crawled by. The guards changed shifts twice, playing cards and scrolling on their phones to pass the time. The biker appeared to doze, but his fingers worked steadily at his restraints whenever the guards looked away. Across the room, Eli had found a jagged piece of metal from the broken shelf. Slowly, carefully, he sawed at his zip ties. Late afternoon sun slanted through the windows when the biker whispered, "Eli." "Yeah?" "Shift change comes at dusk. We'll have maybe 2 minutes while they swap out." Eli tested his loosened restraints. "Still 3 guards at the door." "Wait for my signal." The biker's eyes flicked meaningfully toward the back of the warehouse, where an old emergency exit was barely visible behind stacked pallets. The sun sank lower, painting the warehouse walls orange. Tension built with each passing minute. Eli's heart hammered against his ribs as he watched the guards check their phones. Knowing they'd be replaced soon, a sudden commotion erupted outside. Shouts and the acrid smell of smoke. The guards jumped to their feet. Holy shit! The dumpster's on fire! One of them yanked open the door, revealing a tower of flames climbing into the darkening sky. Behind the blaze stood Javi, fire extinguisher in hand, doing a terrible job of putting it out. "Little help here?" he called, his voice cracking with manufactured panic. 2 guards rushed outside. The third hesitated in the doorway, looking back at the prisoners. The biker's chin rested on his chest, apparently sound asleep. Eli lay curled on his side, facing the wall. "Just watch them," Javi shouted. "We need help out here." The moment the guard stepped outside, the biker's chains clattered to the floor. He was already moving, ignoring the pain that twisted his features. Eli burst from his own restraints, scrambling to his feet. They limped toward the back exit together. The biker leaning heavily on his son. Every step seemed to take an eternity. Outside, they could hear the guards cursing and shouting as they fought the flames. Eli's hands shook as he shoved aside the pallets blocking their escape. The emergency door's hinges groaned in protest as they pushed through into the gathering dusk. The story continues from here, but as per instructions, I'll stop at this point where they make their move toward the back exit during Javi's distraction. Metal hinges creaked as Eli pushed the emergency door open, supporting his father's weight. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the faint scent of rain. Freedom waited just a few steps away in the darkness. Suddenly, bright lights flooded the alley. Tires screeched against wet pavement. A black SUV skidded to a stop, blocking their escape route. The headlights blinded them, casting long shadows against the warehouse wall. Riggs stepped out of the driver's side, his face twisted with rage. 2 burly men emerged from the passenger doors. Enforcers Eli recognized from previous discipline sessions. The kind of men who enjoyed their work too much. "Going somewhere?" Riggs' voice was a low growl. He cracked his knuckles, moving into the headlights' glare. "And here I thought we were just starting to have fun." The biker straightened up, pushing Eli slightly behind him despite his injuries. His breath came in short, painful gasps, but his eyes remained steady. "It's over, Rig," the biker said quietly. "Let it go," Rig laughed. An ugly, hollow sound. "Over? Nah, old man. This ends when I say it ends." He nodded to his enforcers. "Show them what happens to traitors." The first enforcer lunged at Eli, throwing a heavy punch. Eli ducked, years of street fighting taking over. He drove his shoulder into the man's midsection, sending them both crashing into a stack of empty pallets. The second enforcer went for the biker, who had grabbed a length of rusted pipe from the ground. Despite his injuries, the old man moved with surprising speed. Metal rang against bone as he deflected a blow meant for his head. Riggs stood back, watching with cruel amusement as chaos erupted around him. Eli grappled with his attacker in the splintered remains of the pallets. The enforcer was bigger, stronger, but Eli was fighting for more than just survival now. He drove his elbow up, catching the man's nose with a sickening crunch. Blood sprayed, and the enforcer howled. The biker wielded his makeshift weapon with desperate precision, keeping the second enforcer at bay. But each movement cost him. Blood seeped through his shirt where Riggs' men had beaten him earlier. His breaths came shorter, raspier. "Getting tired, old man?" Riggs taunted, circling closer. Eli saw the flash of steel in Riggs' hand, a switchblade catching the headlights. His blood ran cold. "Dad!" he shouted, struggling to break free from his fight. The enforcer grabbed Eli's jacket, slamming him back down. Stars exploded behind, his eyes as his head cracked against concrete. Through blurred vision, he saw Rig closing in on his father. The biker swung his pipe at the second enforcer, creating space. But the movement left him open. Rig struck like a snake, blade slashing toward the old man's throat. "No!" Eli roared. He brought his knee up hard, catching his attacker in the groin. The man's grip loosened just enough. Eli rolled free, scrambling toward his father. The biker saw Riggs' attack coming. He tried to pivot away, but his injury slowed him. The blade caught him across the ribs instead of the throat, opening a long, deep gash. Yet somehow, he stayed standing. Eli tackled Riggs from behind, sending them both sprawling. The switchblade skittered across the pavement. They rolled in the dirt and oil stains, trading savage blows. Riggs fought like a cornered animal, all technique abandoned for pure violence. A boot caught Eli in the stomach, driving the air from his lungs. Another strike snapped his head back. Riggs' hands found his throat, squeezing. Black spots danced at the edges of Eli's vision. Then Riggs' weight vanished. The biker had somehow summoned the strength to pull him off, throwing himself between them. "Not my son," he gasped, blood dripping from his side. Riggs snarled and charged, but the biker met him with desperate strength. They crashed against the warehouse wall. The old man's pipe had fallen, but he used his body as a shield, taking blow after blow meant for Eli. Eli's gaze fell on something half hidden under the SUV, the pistol he'd refused to use earlier. He lunged for it, fingers closing around cold metal just as Riggs slammed his father against the wall again. Without hesitation, Eli raised the gun and fired into the night sky. The shot cracked like thunder, echoing off the warehouse walls. Everyone froze. "Back off!" Eli's voice was hoarse but steady, the pistol now aimed at Riggs' chest. "It's done!" Riggs' eyes narrowed, calculating the odds. Behind him, distant sirens began to wail. The sound grew closer. Multiple cars approaching fast. Red and blue lights started painting the warehouse walls, reflecting off broken windows. "Cops!" one of the enforcers shouted, already backing toward the SUV. The one with the broken nose was right behind him, holding his bloody face. Riggs' expression twisted with fury and disbelief. He glanced between the approaching lights and Eli's unwavering gun. "This isn't over," he spat. But he was moving too, retreating to the vehicle. The SUV's engine roared to life. Tires spun on wet pavement as they peeled away into the darkness, leaving the smell of burning rubber behind. Eli lowered the gun, his hand shaking. He turned to check on his father, just in time to see the old man's legs give out. "Dad!" The pistol clattered to the ground as Eli rushed forward. He caught the biker before he hit the pavement, easing him down. Blood soaked the entire side of his shirt now, hot and sticky against Eli's hands. "Help!" Eli screamed as police lights flooded the alley. "Somebody help us!" The biker's eyes fluttered, his breathing shallow. His calloused hand found Eli's arm, squeezing weakly. Red and blue lights painted his pale face as sirens filled the night. Fluorescent lights hummed softly in the hospital corridor. The steady beep of monitors marked time as Eli watched his father's chest rise and fall beneath thin white sheets. Bandages covered the worst of the cuts and bruises, but the biker's weathered face looked peaceful for the first time since their reunion. Eli shifted in the hard plastic chair, wincing at his own injuries. The doctors had cleaned and wrapped his cuts, given him something for the pain, but he refused to leave for proper rest. His clothes still carried traces of warehouse dirt and his father's blood. Down the hall, 2 police officers spoke quietly with Javi. The young gang member had stayed behind when the others fled, choosing to help rather than run. He kept glancing nervously at Eli, as if seeking reassurance that he'd made the right choice. Tara appeared in the doorway, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. Dark circles ringed her eyes. She'd been here for hours, ever since leading the police to the warehouse. Her waitress uniform was rumpled, but her concern seemed genuine. "You look like you could use this," she said softly, offering Eli one of the cups. "Thanks." His voice was rough from exhaustion. The coffee's warmth seeped into his bruised hands. Heavy footsteps approached. A detective entered, middle-aged, with kind eyes that had seen too much. He carried a thick manila folder. "Mr. Martinez?" The detective addressed Eli. "I'm Detective Roberts. We've been going through some old files about that warehouse. There's something you should know." Eli straightened, suddenly alert. What is it? That fire 30 years ago. The one your father was imprisoned for? Roberts opened the folder. We found connections to a child trafficking ring that operated in the area during that time. Multiple missing persons cases, all kids between 8 and 15. The coffee cup trembled in Eli's hand. What are you saying? The warehouse wasn't just a gang hangout back then. It was a holding facility for trafficked children. Roberts's voice grew gentle. And based on recovered documents, someone tried to expose the operation just before the fire. Someone on the inside who couldn't stomach it anymore. Eli's throat tightened. He looked at his father's sleeping face, seeing past the years of hard living to the man who must have been. The one who chose to burn it all down rather than let it continue. Tara touched his shoulder lightly. Tell me, she said. The words spilled out then, like a dam breaking. Eli told her everything. About growing up angry and alone, bouncing between foster homes, finding false family in the gang. How he'd blamed his absent father for abandoning him, never knowing the truth. I was so stupid, he whispered. So blind. He tried to save kids like me before he even knew. His voice cracked. Before he knew I'd end up in that life anyway. Tara listened without judgment, her eyes bright with unshed tears. A nurse entered to check vitals, her shoes squeaking on polished floors. He's doing well, she assured them. The rest is helping his body heal. Eli noticed his father's belongings on a side table. The leather satchel they'd searched through at the warehouse. The Bible lay on top, worn and well-loved. Can I? He hesitated. Would it be okay if I read to him? They say sometimes people can hear. The nurse smiled warmly. Of course. Reading to patients often helps. Eli reached for the Bible with trembling hands. As he lifted it, several folded papers slipped from between its pages. They were yellowed with age, creased from repeated handling. His heart stopped when he saw the first one. It was addressed to him. What is it? Tara asked softly. Letters, Eli breathed. They're all letters. To me. The paper shook as he unfolded it. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, as if each word had been chosen with great care. Dear Eli, today marks 5 years since I last saw your face. You'd be starting school now. I wonder if you like to read, if you make friends easily. I wonder if you're happy. The chaplain here says I should write these letters, even if I can never send them. He says it might help heal what's broken in me. But how do you heal from losing your whole world? I dream about you sometimes, about teaching you to ride a bike, taking you fishing, all the things fathers are supposed to do. Then I wake up in this cell and remember that someone else might be doing those things now. I pray they're doing them right. I want you to know I tried to find you. Every appeal, every letter to social services. They won't tell me where you are. Maybe that's for the best. What could a man like me offer anyway? But son, I need you to understand something. That night, the night everything changed, I made a choice that cost me you. I saw children being hurt, being sold like things instead of precious souls. I couldn't stop it legally. No one would listen, so I burned it down. I thought I could serve my time and come back to you. I never dreamed they'd take you away forever. That's the price I paid for doing what I thought was right. Some days, I'm not sure it was worth it, but then I remember those kids' faces, and I know I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd walked away. I hope someday you'll understand. I hope someday you'll know that everything I did out of love. Love for you. Love for all the children who needed someone to fight for them. More than anything, I hope you grew up strong and kind. I hope you learned to stand up for what's right, even when it costs you everything. I love you, son. I always will. Dad. Eli's voice broke on the last word. Tears splashed onto the aged paper. He looked up to find Tara crying, too, her hand pressed to her mouth. A soft sound drew their attention. The biker's eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on his son's face. Recognition dawned in his tired gaze as he listened to his own words from so long ago, finally reaching their intended audience. Morning sunlight filtered through the hospital window, casting warm squares across the clean white sheets. The biker sat propped up against pillows, slowly working his way through a bowl of oatmeal. His movements were careful, mindful of the bandages wrapped around his torso. Eli appeared in the doorway, carrying a small portable radio he'd borrowed from one of the nurses. Dark circles lingered under his eyes. He'd barely slept, choosing instead to stay close to his father's room. But there was something lighter in his face now, as if some of the old anger had begun to fade. "Found this," Eli said, setting the radio on the bedside table. "Thought maybe, well, I remember Mom used to play blues music in the kitchen. At least, I think I remember that." The biker's hand paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "She did," he said softly. Every Sunday morning while she made pancakes, Eli fiddled with the dial until static gave way to the low, soulful notes of an old blues song. B.B. King's guitar wept through the tiny speaker, filling the sterile hospital room with memories. A gentle smile touched the biker's weathered face. "Your mother loved this one," he said. "Used to dance you around the kitchen to it when you were barely walking." Eli settled into the chair beside the bed, his shoulders relaxing as the music played. For a while, they just listened, letting the blues wash over them like a cleansing rain. "Tell me about before," Eli finally said. "About the club, about what really happened. I need to understand." The biker set his breakfast aside, gathering his thoughts. "I was young," he began, "angry at the world, looking for somewhere to belong. The club felt like family at first. We helped each other, looked out for our own." He shook his head. "But things changed. New leadership came in, started pushing us into darker business. Drugs, weapons. I tried to ignore it, tell myself it wasn't my problem. Until the warehouse," Eli prompted quietly. "Until the warehouse." The biker's voice grew heavy. "I was doing a late-night security run. Wasn't supposed to go inside, just check the perimeter. But I heard crying." His hands clenched in the sheets. "Found a hidden room. Kids locked up like animals, waiting to be sold. Some of them weren't much older than you were." Eli's jaw tightened. "What did you do?" "First, I tried going to the police, but the operation had protection. Cops on the payroll, judges in their pocket. Nobody would touch it." The biker's eyes grew distant, remembering. "I knew what would happen if I testified. The club would have killed me, maybe come after you and your mother. So I waited until a shipment night, when the warehouse was empty. Set charges at the Kia. Support beams burned every record they had. But they caught you anyway," the biker nodded. "Someone saw me leaving. I took the fall for arson, kept my mouth shut about why. Thought I was protecting you." His voice cracked. "Then your mother got sick while I was inside. By the time I got out, you were lost in the system. I tried everything to find you. Hired investigators, wrote letters to every foster agency in 3 states. But they said I had no rights anymore, that it was better for you to have a fresh start." Silence fell between them, broken only by the soft guitar notes still playing from the radio. "I was so angry," Eli admitted. "Growing up, I made up stories about who you were, why you left. Told myself you were just another deadbeat who didn't want the responsibility." He rubbed his face. "The gang. They found me when I was 16, living rough after running from my 4th foster home. They gave me what I thought I needed. Respect, protection, a place to belong." "I know that pull," the biker said quietly. "The way they make you feel powerful when you felt powerless for so long." "Yeah." Eli stood up, pacing the small room. "But I'm tired. Tired of violence, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of hurting people to prove I'm tough enough." He turned to his father, vulnerability raw in his eyes. "But I don't know how to be anything else anymore. Don't know if I can change." The biker straightened in his bed, wincing slightly at the movement. "Let me tell you about someone who helped me believe change was possible. Her name is Miss Avery. She was a school teacher who started visiting prisons after seeing too many of her students end up there. What made her different? She saw past what we'd done to who we could be. Didn't excuse our choices, but didn't define us by them either. A warm respect filled his voice. She helped me find my way back to faith. Taught me that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing a different future. And she runs a halfway house now? The biker nodded. For men trying to leave the street life behind. Gives them structure, job training, counseling, everything they need to build something new. He reached for Eli's hand, gripping it with surprising strength. Let's go see her. It's time we both came home. Eli's fingers tightened around his father's, and for a moment, they were both quiet, listening to the blues song fade into its final notes. The morning sun had climbed higher, warming the room, and somewhere in that light, something like hope began to grow. The old pickup truck rumbled down a winding country road, its faded blue paint catching the midday sun. Inside, Eli kept glancing sideways at his father, watching for any signs of discomfort as they hit the occasional pothole. The biker sat quietly in the passenger seat, one hand pressed lightly against his bandaged ribs, the other holding a small duffel bag of belongings the hospital had given him. You sure you're okay to travel? Eli asked, slowing down as they approached another bump. We could have waited another day. The biker shook his head. Been in enough hospitals for one lifetime. His voice was gruff, but held no complaint. Besides, Miss Avery's been waiting. They turned onto a narrow gravel drive marked by a wooden signpost. Hand-painted letters spelled out New Horizons Haven in warm blue paint, with transitional home for at-risk men, written beneath in smaller text. The driveway opened up to reveal a 2-story farmhouse, its white paint fresh and clean against dark green shutters. Flower boxes hung beneath windows, bursting with red geraniums, and a wide wraparound porch invited visitors to sit and stay a while. Eli parked the borrowed truck in front of the house, taking in the peaceful scene. It seemed almost too quiet after years of city noise and warehouse hideouts. Nice place, he said, trying to mask his nervousness. Before they could reach for their doors, a woman emerged onto the porch. Miss Avery stood tall and dignified despite her age, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple floral dress and practical shoes, but there was something about her bearing that commanded respect without demanding it. James, she called out warmly, using the biker's real name as she descended the porch steps. When the hospital called, I could hardly believe it. She reached them, just as the biker eased himself out of the truck, and without hesitation, she wrapped him in a gentle embrace, mindful of his injuries. It's good to see you, Miss Avery, the biker said softly, returning the hug with his free arm. She stepped back, holding him at arm's length to study his face. You look like you've been through the wars, but your eyes are clearer than I've ever seen them. Her gaze shifted to Eli, who hung back uncertainly by the truck. Her face softened with recognition. And this must be Eli. The biker nodded. My son. Miss Avery moved toward Eli with the same natural grace she'd shown his father. Before he could react, she'd pulled him into a hug as well. You look just like your mama, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Eli stiffened at first, unused to such open affection, but something about Miss Avery's warmth made his defenses crumble. You knew my mother? He asked. Come sit, she said, gesturing to the porch. We have so much to talk about. Minutes later, they settled into comfortable rocking chairs, tall glasses of fresh lemonade sweating in the afternoon heat. Miss Avery's presence seemed to make even silence feel welcoming. Your mother used to volunteer here, she explained to Eli. Before you were born, she helped teach reading to men working on their GEDs. Miss Avery smiled at the memory. That's how she met your father, actually. He was one of our success stories back then, before... She trailed off, letting the weight of history settle gently. Before everything went wrong, the biker finished. And now here you both are, Miss Avery said, proving it's never too late for things to go right. She set her glass down and faced them squarely. I understand there's been some trouble. The police called me about the warehouse investigation. Eli shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Yes, ma'am. They're reopening the case, the biker added, looking into the trafficking operation from back then. Seems some of the old records survived the fire after all. Miss Avery nodded thoughtfully. The truth has a way of surfacing, even after all these years. She turned to Eli. And what about you, young man? What are your plans now? Eli stared into his lemonade, watching condensation roll down the glass. I want to change, he said finally. I'm not sure how. That's why we're here, the biker said quietly. Indeed it is. Miss Avery stood up. Come with me. I want to show you something. She led them through the front door into a house that felt lived in and loved. Photos of smiling men lined the walls. Graduation pictures, workshop ceremonies, family reunions. The wooden floors gleamed with care, and somewhere upstairs they could hear muffled laughter and conversation. Miss Avery guided them to a room on the first floor, at the end of a sunny hallway. She opened the door to reveal a modest but comfortable space with 2 single beds, a shared desk, and a window overlooking the garden. This room's been waiting, she said simply. For both of you, if you choose to accept it. Eli walked into the room slowly, taking in the fresh sheets, the empty dresser drawers pulled slightly open in welcome, the small bookshelf waiting to be filled. Both of us? This isn't charity, Miss Avery said firmly. It's an opportunity, and it comes with expectations. There are house rules, mandatory counseling sessions, job training requirements. We help men rebuild their lives, but they have to be willing to do the work. The biker touched the wooden bedpost, his weathered hand gentle against the smooth surface. We're willing. Good. Miss Avery's smile was both kind and determined. Because I expect great things from both of you. Later that night, after a simple dinner with the other residents and a tour of the facilities, Eli lay in his bed, staring up at the ceiling. The mattress felt almost too soft after years of sleeping on floors and couches. Across the room, he could hear his father's steady breathing. The biker wasn't asleep either. He sat in a chair by the window, his silhouette outlined by moonlight. His eyes rested on his son's form, watching the rise and fall of his chest, a sight he'd thought he'd never see again. In the quiet darkness, the biker's whispered words barely disturbed the peace. Thank you, God, for bringing him back. Through half-closed eyes, Eli watched his father bow his head in prayer, and for the first time in years, he felt truly safe. The scent of coffee and bacon drifted through New Horizons Haven as dawn broke over the countryside. Eli woke to find his father's bed already made, military neat with hospital corners. Through the window, he could see men gathering on the back patio, some clutching coffee mugs, others thumbing through worn Bibles. Morning devotional starts in 10, the biker said, appearing in the doorway. He'd changed his bandages, and though he moved stiffly, his eyes held a calm Eli had never seen before. Eli sat up, running a hand through his hair. I'm not really the praying type. Neither was I, his father replied simply. Just come sit. No one expects you to be anything you're not. The dining room was larger than Eli expected, with several round tables instead of one long one. Men of various ages filled the chairs, some wearing work clothes, others in casual attire. Miss Avery stood near a podium, greeting each person by name. Eli followed his father to the breakfast line, where residents served themselves from steel warming trays. The food was simple but plentiful: scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and fresh fruit. An older man with weathered hands was flipping pancakes on a griddle, whistling softly. That's Marcus, the biker explained quietly. Been here 3 years. Used to be a chef before things went sideways. Now he's working his way back. They found seats near the back, and Eli watched as the room settled into what seemed like a familiar routine. Miss Avery opened with a short prayer, then read a passage about second chances. Her voice carried clearly through the room, but there was nothing preachy about her tone, just warm conviction and gentle invitation. "Today's meditation is about masks," she said, closing her Bible. "The faces we show the world versus who we really are." Would anyone like to share their thoughts? Several men spoke up, their stories raw and honest. One talked about pretending to be tough to survive prison. Another admitted he'd hidden his addiction from his family for years. Eli found himself leaning forward, surprised by their openness. A sudden movement at the entrance caught his attention. His heart jumped. Javi stood in the doorway, looking young and lost in oversized clothes. Miss Avery moved to greet him, and several residents shifted to make room at a nearby table. The biker touched Eli's arm. You okay?" Eli nodded, watching as Javi was given a plate and welcomed into the circle. The kid who'd helped save their lives now sat among them, shoulders hunched, picking at his eggs. After breakfast, Miss Avery gathered everyone for the day's assignments. The Haven ran on structured routine: morning chores, counseling sessions, job training, and community service. Eli was paired with Marcus for kitchen duty, while his father joined a maintenance team working on the garden fence. "Your old man's something else," Marcus said as they washed dishes. "Been here one day and already volunteered for the heavy lifting, injuries and all." "Yeah," Eli replied, surprised by the pride in his voice. "He's stubborn that way." The morning passed quickly. Eli found himself relaxing into the rhythm of the house, watching how the other residents moved with purpose and dignity. No one barked orders or demanded respect. They simply worked together, helping when needed, stepping back when appropriate. After lunch, Miss Avery called a house meeting. The men gathered in the common room, settling into chairs and couches. The biker stood near the front, his presence drawing quiet attention. "I owe you all the truth," he began, his voice low but steady. 30 years ago, I helped burn down a warehouse." He paused, gathering strength. "But it wasn't gang violence like they said. That warehouse, they were using it to traffic children." The room went still. Even those who'd heard whispers of the story leaned forward. "I was running with a bad crowd back then," the biker continued. "Thought they were family. Then I discovered what was really happening in that building. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, kept seeing those kids' faces." He described the night of the fire, how he'd made sure the building was empty, how he'd destroyed evidence of the trafficking ring, how he'd taken the fall rather than risk the gang retaliating against witnesses. "Served 15 years, he said. "Lost my son to the system, but I'd do it again." Miss Avery stepped forward. "The district attorney's office called this morning. They're reopening the case based on new evidence. The truth is finally coming to light." Several men wiped their eyes. One resident, a former corrections officer, stood up and shook the biker's hand. Javi, sitting in the corner, looked at the biker with something like awe. That afternoon, Miss Avery took Eli to visit the youth center where many residents volunteered. The converted community center buzzed with activity. Kids playing basketball, doing homework, learning trades in small workshops. "We believe in paying it forward," Miss Avery explained. "Many of these children come from situations similar to what you experienced. They need mentors who understand." A boy about 13 caught Eli's attention. He was trying to fix a bike chain, his movements angry and frustrated. The other kids gave him space, and the volunteers watched him cautiously. "That's Tommy," Miss Avery said softly. "Lost his mother last year. Father's in prison. He's been in 3 foster homes since then." Eli moved closer, recognizing the barely contained rage in the boy's movements. "Need a hand with that?" he asked. Tommy glared up at him, defiant. "I got it." "Yeah, I used to say that too." Eli crouched down. "Thing is, bike chains are tricky, especially when you're trying to force them." The boy's hands stilled. "You know about bikes?" "Some. Learned the hard way, mostly." Eli pointed to the chain. "Mind if I show you something?" For the next hour, they worked together. Eli demonstrating proper technique while Tommy gradually relaxed. The boy asked about Eli's scar, and Eli found himself being honest. "Got it in a fight," he said. "Thought fighting was the only way to be strong back then. Turns out there are better ways." Later, in the Haven's bathroom, Eli stood before the mirror, studying his reflection. The scar above his eye caught the light, a pale line that had defined him for so long. He touched it gently, remembering the angry kid who'd earned it, the lost son who'd worn it like armor. For the first time, he saw it differently, not as a mark of shame or toughness, but as part of his story, a reminder of where he'd been and how far he might still go. The autumn wind whipped through the chain-link fence surrounding the old warehouse. Yellow police tape fluttered against metal posts, and construction barriers formed a perimeter around the building's weathered facade. Camera crews from local news stations set up their equipment, adjusting lights and checking microphones while a small crowd gathered in the makeshift viewing area. Eli stood beside his father at the back of the assembly, both wearing clean button-down shirts Miss Avery had insisted on. The biker's wounds had mostly healed, though he still favored his right side. His hair was neatly combed, and his beard trimmed, small changes that made him look more distinguished than dangerous. "Nervous?" Eli asked quietly. The biker shook his head. "Just strange. Being here again." They watched as city officials arrived in a procession of dark vehicles. The mayor, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair, stepped out first, followed by the police chief and several council members. Miss Avery was there too, representing New Horizons Haven, speaking quietly with a group of business leaders who'd helped fund the project. "Look," Eli nudged his father, pointing to a familiar face in the crowd. Javi had come, wearing his work uniform from the auto shop where he'd started apprenticing. The young man gave them a slight wave, then ducked his head shyly. More people filtered in. Curious neighbors, community organizers, even some of the men from the Haven. Tara from the diner arrived with a group of other service workers, all of them having taken their morning break to attend. The crowd swelled to nearly 100, their murmured conversations creating a gentle hum of anticipation. At precisely 10 o'clock, the mayor approached the temporary podium. Camera lights flickered on, and reporters raised their microphones. The crowd fell silent. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and steady. "We gather today at a place that has long stood as a symbol of our city's darker past. This warehouse, abandoned for decades, has cast a shadow over our community, both literally and figuratively." She gestured to the building behind her. "But today, we begin the process of transformation. What was once a place of pain will become a beacon of hope." The police chief stepped forward next, holding a thick manila folder. "For 30 years, this building was associated with a crime, an act of arson that sent a man to prison. Today, we officially correct that record." He opened the folder, removing several documents. New evidence, corroborated by multiple sources, has revealed the truth. The fire set here in 1993 wasn't an act of gang violence. It was an attempt to expose and destroy a child trafficking operation that had been using this facility as a distribution point. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people gasped. Others nodded grimly, having heard whispers of this truth for years. "The man convicted of that crime," the chief continued, "served 15 years in prison, rather than risk retaliation against potential witnesses. He protected others at the cost of his own freedom and the chance to raise his only son." Eli felt his father's hand shake slightly. He gripped it firmly, offering silent support. The mayor returned to the podium. "Today we announce two things. First, in partnership with private donors and community organizations, this warehouse will be completely renovated and repurposed as the New Hope Youth Center, a place where young people can learn trades, receive counseling, and find mentorship." Applause broke out. Miss Avery wiped tears from her eyes as several of her residents whistled and cheered. "Second," the mayor continued, "we wish to honor the man whose actions, though misunderstood at the time, helped expose a terrible evil. Would Michael James Thompson please step forward? The crowd turned, searching. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, Eli gave his father a gentle push. The biker, Michael, walked slowly through the parting crowd. His steps were measured, his expression humble but dignified. As he approached the podium, people began to clap. The applause grew, spreading through the assembly like a wave, until everyone was standing, cheering for the man they'd once feared or ignored. The mayor shook his hand, then stepped aside so he could face the crowd. Michael cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the attention but determined to speak. "I'm not much for speeches," he began, his deep voice carrying across the suddenly quiet gathering. "What happened here? It broke something in me. Seeing those children, knowing what was happening. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try to stop it." He paused, looking at Eli. "I lost everything because of that night. My freedom, my son. But standing here now, knowing this place will help kids instead of hurting them, that makes it worth it." The applause resumed, even louder than before. Someone shouted, "Thank you," and others joined in. Michael nodded once, then stepped back, letting the mayor retake the podium to share specific details about the renovation plans. Eli barely heard them. He watched his father return through the crowd, accepting handshakes and words of gratitude with quiet grace. When Michael finally reached him, Eli surprised them both by pulling him into a tight hug. They stood together as the ceremony continued, listening as architects described their vision for the new center. The harsh warehouse exterior would be softened with gardens and murals. Inside, there would be classrooms, workshops, counseling offices, and a community gathering space. The loading dock would become a skateboard park, and the old parking lot would feature a basketball court. When the formal presentation ended, people lingered, talking in small groups. Several approached Michael to share their support or ask questions. He answered politely but briefly, clearly eager to step out of the spotlight. As the crowd began to disperse, Eli and his father walked to the edge of the property. They stood looking at the warehouse, not as it was, but as it would be. "Think I could help teach kids here someday?" Eli asked suddenly. Michael turned to his son, a smile warming his weathered face. "That's exactly why we're still breathing, son." The autumn morning air felt crisp and clean in the newly renovated garage behind New Horizons Haven. Sunlight streamed through the fresh-painted windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor where the biker's old motorcycle stood, its chrome dulled but its spirit unbroken. Tools were laid out neatly on a red metal workbench, and the smell of coffee mingled with motor oil. Michael, still known to most as the biker, knelt beside the motorcycle, carefully removing the dented gas tank. His hands moved with practiced ease, though his recently healed injuries made him a bit slower than usual. Eli stood nearby, watching intently and holding a socket wrench. "Mom used to hate this bike," Eli said suddenly, running his hand along the worn leather seat. "Said it was too loud." Michael chuckled softly. "Sarah never did like the noise, but she loved the rides." He set the tank aside and reached for a rag to wipe his hands. "Remember how she'd wrap her arms around me so tight? Like she thought she might float away if she didn't. I remember watching from the window when you'd come home." Eli's voice grew quiet. "Used to think you were some kind of superhero on this thing." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Michael showing Eli how to clean the carburetor, explaining each part's purpose. The motorcycle had taken a beating during the kidnapping. Scraped paint, bent handlebars, cracked lights. But its heart was sound. Just needed patience and care to bring it back. "Pass me that Phillips head?" Michael asked, pointing to the toolbox. As Eli handed it over, classic rock drifted from an old radio in the corner, some forgotten station playing songs from better days. "Hey, I know this one," Eli said, beginning to hum along to Sweet Home Alabama. "They used to play this at the shelter when I was little. Before." He trailed off, but Michael nodded, understanding. "Your mother loved Lynyrd Skynyrd," he said. "Knew every word to Free Bird. Used to sing it while she made breakfast." "Yeah?" Eli bowed. smiled, trying to picture it. What else did she like? Pancakes, Michael replied. But only with real maple syrup. Said the fake stuff was an insult to breakfast. He paused, remembering. She'd make them in funny shapes for you. Dinosaurs, stars, once even tried to make a motorcycle. How'd that turn out? Looked more like a drunk camel. They both laughed, the sound echoing off the garage walls. The door creaked open, and Javi poked his head in. He held a broom in one hand, looking uncertain. Miss Avery said you might need help cleaning up in here. Perfect timing, Michael said, waving him in. We're just about to check the spark plugs. Want to learn? Javi's face lit up. He propped the broom against the wall and hurried over. Eli shifted to make room, pointing out the tools they'd need. See this gap here? Eli explained, holding up an old plug. That's where the spark jumps. If it's too wide or too narrow, the engine won't run right. Javi leaned in close, fascinated. How do you know if it's right? Here, Eli handed him a gap tool. I'll show you. Michael stepped back, watching his son teach. Eli's voice was patient, his instructions clear. He'd inherited his mother's gift for explanation. Breaking complex things into simple steps, Javi absorbed every word, asking smart questions and handling the parts with growing confidence. The morning stretched into afternoon. They worked steadily, talking about small things, favorite foods, funny stories, dreams for the future. Javi mentioned wanting to open his own shop someday. Eli suggested they could partner up. Michael just listened, his heart so full it almost hurt. By Saturday, the motorcycle gleamed under the charity event's bright lights. The warehouse's main floor had been transformed. Strings of warm bulbs hung from the rafters. Tables dressed in white cloth held silent auction items, and a small stage stood where Eli would soon speak. People filtered in. Familiar faces from the shelter, local business owners, curious community members. Miss Avery worked the room like a pro, introducing potential donors to success stories. Tara arrived in a pretty blue dress, bringing a group of regulars from the diner who'd pooled their tips to make a donation. When it was time for the speeches, Michael squeezed Eli's shoulder. You've got this, son. Eli nodded, straightened his tie, another gift from Miss Avery, and walked to the microphone. The crowd quieted, all eyes on the young man who had once been their cautionary tale. Most of you know this building's history, he began, his voice steady. You know what happened here 30 years ago, and what almost happened a few months back. But that's not what I want to talk about tonight. He gestured to the renovated space around them. This place isn't about the past anymore. It's about what comes next. For me, that future started with a broken motorcycle and a father who never stopped writing letters, even when he thought I'd never read them. In the audience, Michael blinked back tears as Eli continued. Someone once told me every choice leads somewhere. Tonight, we're choosing to believe in second chances, in the power of small kindnesses, in the idea that anything broken can be restored if you're willing to do the work. The audience applauded warmly. The auction began, with the motorcycle as the centerpiece. Bids came quickly, first from local collectors, then from business owners looking to support the cause. The price climbed steadily until a clear voice cut through the crowd. $10,000. Heads turned. Tara stood near the back, her hand raised high. A murmur ran through the room. Everyone knew waitress wages couldn't support such a bid. She walked forward, explaining with a shy smile. The diner's being franchised. Owners retiring and offered me first chance to buy in. I thought, maybe this could be our delivery vehicle? Seems fitting, since it all started there. Michael and Eli exchanged stunned looks as Tara approached them. You saved me from more than just a handsy customer that day, she said quietly. You showed me what courage looks like. Both of you did. She held out her hand. So really, I'm the one who owes you. The autumn sun cast long shadows through the tall windows of the Haven garage, painting golden stripes across the polished concrete floor. What was once a hollow shell of rust and broken dreams now hummed with life and purpose. The sharp ping of metal tools mingled with young voices, creating a symphony of renewal that echoed through the renovated space. In the main workshop area, 5 teenagers huddled around a vintage Harley, their faces intent as they diagnosed an electrical issue. Their mentor, a reformed gang member with grease-stained hands, pointed to various components while explaining the intricate dance of wires and connections. The walls, once covered in graffiti, now displayed educational diagrams and inspirational quotes alongside framed photographs of successful graduates. Eli moved between workstations, his steps confident and sure. He'd traded his old leather jacket for a navy blue work shirt with the Haven Garage embroidered above the pocket, though he kept his signature bandana, now clean and properly tied. The scar above his eye had faded somewhat, becoming less a mark of shame and more a reminder of the journey that brought him here. "Remember to document everything in your maintenance logs," he called out to the group. "Small details matter when you're rebuilding something this complex." Near the entrance, Javi led a tour for potential donors, his enthusiasm infectious as he explained their outreach programs. At 28, he'd grown into his role as community liaison, wearing a pressed shirt and speaking with the confidence of someone who knew his work mattered. "We don't just teach mechanics," he explained to the visitors. "We're building a support system. When these kids master a skill, they master themselves. Every engine they fix shows them that broken things can work again." Miss Avery watched from her small office, its door always open. Her hair had grown a bit whiter, but her eyes retained their sharp clarity. She'd arranged her space with the same thoughtful care she'd once given her classroom. Photos of success stories on the walls, a bowl of hard candies on her desk, and always an extra chair for anyone who needed to talk. In a quiet corner of the building, a simple wooden display case caught the afternoon light. Behind its glass, the biker's weathered Bible lay open to a marked passage about redemption. Beside it, protected in a frame, was the faded photograph of young Eli with the nun, its edges soft with age. One of Eli's childhood drawings, a crayon masterpiece of a motorcycle under a rainbow, completed the collection. The engraved quote above read in elegant script, "What they found in the warehouse was hope." The biker himself, now known by most as Michael, though some habits died hard, worked with a small group in the advanced mechanics section. His hands moved with practiced ease as he demonstrated proper welding technique. The students watched intently, drawn in by his quiet authority and genuine interest in their progress. Tara breezed through the main doors, carrying a stack of papers and wearing a business suit that seemed at odds with the garage setting. Her confidence had grown exponentially since taking her seat on the board, and her relationship with James, a major donor she'd met at a fundraising event, had brought unexpected joy to her life. "Monthly reports are in," she announced, dropping the papers on Miss Avery's desk. "Enrollment's up 30% since last quarter." Miss Avery smiled, adjusting her reading glasses. "And how many of those came from your diner referrals?" 8, Tara replied proudly. "Turns out waitresses notice a lot about people who might need a second chance." The afternoon light began to soften, signaling the end of another productive day. Students packed up their tools, logging their progress and cleaning their workstations with practiced efficiency. The sound of motorcycles starting up, properly tuned engines thanks to their own hard work, filled the air as some headed home. Javi gathered his outreach team for a final huddle, planning tomorrow's neighborhood canvas. "Remember," he told them, "we were all where they are now. When you talk to these kids, share your truth. That's what makes the difference." As the building quieted, Eli found his father sitting on the front steps, watching the day wind down. He joined him, their shoulders touching companionably. The concrete was still warm from the day's sun, and the air carried the familiar scent of oil and metal and possibility. A group of teenagers on bicycles raced past, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. They waved as they passed, regular visitors to the garage's free repair clinics. The bike's wheels gleamed with fresh oil, spokes straight and true, thanks to skills learned within these walls. Eli turned to his father, studying the face that had become so familiar over these past months. The hard edges had softened, though the strength remained. "You ever think we'd end up here?" he asked, genuine wonder in his voice. Michael chuckled, the sound warm and real. Not in a million years, he paused, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Then he added, with quiet certainty, "But this is exactly where we belong." They sat in comfortable silence as shadows lengthened across the parking lot. Above them, the new sign caught the last rays of sunlight, its fresh paint gleaming. The Haven Garage. Built from broken roads. Hope rides again. The message was simple but profound. Much like the truth they discovered in this very building. Sometimes the darkest places could become the brightest beacons of hope. Sometimes the longest detours led exactly where you needed to go. And sometimes, in the midst of trying to rebuild engines, people found themselves being rebuilt too.